address at some level these requirements that are coming down the pipe. The problem, I think, is that they don't know how they're addressing, and that's the gap. And you're right. The client needs to do their business. It's one thing to say, we want you to manage our IT infrastructure. We want to have help desk. We want to have all these services in place. This is taking it to another level because, not only is the MSP relied upon for that, now they're going to be relied upon for helping them, determine their own, suitability to these mandates. What of your services map to this particular requirement? Do I need MFA? Do I need asset tracking? Do I need encryption? And how does the stack of services that you provide map to those? Because I need that to answer these questionnaires. I need it if I'm going to be audited.
Hello, welcome, and thank you for tuning into Channel Voices, the podcast for future channel leaders, where we learn the ins and outs of partner ecosystems through casual conversations with channel professionals from a variety of industries, partner types, and geographies. My name is Maciek, and I'm your host. Cam Roberson, welcome to Channel Voices.
Hey, nice to be here.
To set the scene, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you get started in channel? Maybe a little bit about your journey.
Well, I'd be happy to. How much time do we got?
We'll make time for you.
Yeah, as somewhat accidental, Magic. I had an ad agency for many years, 12, I think, where we, help with marketing, messaging, building websites, collateral, writing copy, the whole gamut. And this company, Beachhead, was a client of mine. And we got to be rather friendly. I think they liked what we did for them. And, sort of a couple of circumstances, somebody came and offered me some money to sell my business. And I said, very good. Kind of conveyed that to my friends at Beachhead, and they sort of said, hey, why don't you come, run our marketing group? And I said, that sounds like a pretty good idea. And I did. And everything just sort of happened rather quickly, actually. And found myself marketing for Beachhead Solutions. I knew a little bit about the company, of course, but, not so much of security services, SaaS services. But, turned out I really enjoyed it. Well, I don't want to go on too long, but Beachhead used to sell direct. We sold direct, okay. And we sold our product as a prepaid subscription. It wasn't a monthly consumption-based model. And we sold direct to enterprise and medium-sized business and small businesses. And then, through the course of that, and I started having more responsibility with respect to sales, we had recruited a reseller of our a company that sold mostly hardware, but they had a particular client that needed our service. And, one after another, they started bringing in clients. Well, we sold to them, they, at a discount, and they marked it up, and it was a prepaid, subscription for 1 or 3 years or whatnot. And then something happened. They started telling me that the purchase order was going to be coming from a finance company. I said, okay. And, come to find out, they were actually financing the product for their customers as if it were a capital asset. And so, it sort of clicked with me. Oh, okay. So they're making monthly payments and they're handling accounting a little bit different. And so that was that sort of epiphany. And then we sort of learned about this MSP space. And I can remember it so distinctly. And this goes back, gosh, I want to say 10 years, going to a show, happened to be an ASCII member show, and learning of this entire community of MSPs with relationships selling to small and medium-sized business. Holy mackerel, this is this is perfect for us. um, and so we, within the course of about 6 months, transformed our entire product to be a monthly consumption-based model selling to MSPs. That's how that's the long story as to how I got into the channel.
Perfect. Unlike others on the podcast that I have hosted, and from my own experience and knowing people in the channel, a lot of them ended up in the channel by just how the life went, how the job offers came about, or how their career progression happened, right? Typically through sales or marketing, right?
Yeah.
And that's how people end up in channel.
Yeah.
It's not always like that, but it comes down to the fact that there's so little knowledge still about channel, even though 75% of world trade goes through channel, right?
Yeah.
There still seems to be, it's still a little bit of an enigma to people that are not directly involved with partnerships and channel or ecosystems in overall, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's true. I certainly had no intention of, I'm going to pursue the channel for my career. It just sort of happened. And in many respects, we sort of built our product to adapt to the channel because we believe it's such a good fit for our service and for our platform. So yes, it certainly was not a plan, but I'm glad it worked out the way it did. For me, the channel's been just a wonderful experience. Really,
fantastic.
Really good. Yeah.
Today's topic, and you already mentioned MSPs and adapting the product for the MSPs. So as much as I am aware of MSPs and what they do, today's discussion is more around the compliance regulations that MSPs really need to pay attention to. And that's a topic that I don't have a lot of knowledge of. So I will be asking you quite a few questions here for me to clarify for me certain things.
Yeah.
But you did give me a little bit of literature to read on, and there are some challenges that MSPs commonly face, from what I read, when dealing with regulations. And there's been mentioned of CMMC 2.0, NIST, FTC safeguards, HIPAA. I mean, these are terms that don't mean much to me. I hope that the listeners will already have some knowledge around this, and if not, we'll point them in the right direction where to read up on that. But what are the key challenges, I suppose, that MSPs commonly face when dealing with these type of regulations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll tell you that for me, if we'd had this conversation 6 months ago, I would not have been able to discuss it at great length with you. It's been baptism by fire, and it's coming hard and fast. And what I've learned is that these regulations are already in place, and sort of, I've felt a tremendous need to get versant quickly. And I think the same is true with our MSP community. It's just happening so fast. And while while I certainly can appreciate the workload that an MSP has as a business owner, I think this is something they need to be prepared for because it's coming. It's already here. I'm guessing your listeners have been approached by their clients with getting help with a supply chain questionnaire if they're doing government work, for instance.
Yeah.
Or maybe a list of check boxes of things I need to have in place for cybersecurity insurance, both of which are derived largely from some of the mandates that are coming down the pipe, some of which have been in place for a long time. HIPAA, for instance, kind of the bellwether of here in the States anyway. But more and more frequently, we're seeing the emergence of FTC safeguards and CMMC2 compliance being required. And, FTC in particular, which just, finally got in its final implementation in June, actually, they're being quite aggressive, and probably for very good reason, because there are a lot of people. First of all, it applies to a whole swath of businesses, perhaps millions in the U.S. But they're also going after some egregious, security or lack of security-minded firms. You may have seen some of the press around car dealerships, and we have a lot of our partners who are, scrambling, trying to get car dealerships up and running. Some real horror stories, frankly. But HIPAA has morphed into and produced a recent publication that provides a bunch more specificity to the requirements there. They are including all of these more and more discussion about MSPs, realizing that with small and medium-sized businesses, they're reliant a lot of times on the expertise of the MSP. And so they're bringing the discussion to include them, including guidance on how to find an MSP qualified to assist with these mandates. And so this is coming. My hope is that MSPs really embrace this, both because you don't want to be embarrassed when your client comes and says, "Hey, I need help with being CMMC compliant," but also, I could go into marketing strategies. I empathize with our MSP community about how to differentiate their offering, but it does represent an opportunity to really be cutting edge in terms of knowledge, documentation, being able to map the services that you provide to those that are required for these various mandates and so forth. So, it's coming. It's already here. It's both intimidating, but also a tremendous opportunity, I think.
And I suppose it's fair to say that, the companies reach out to MSPs for help, not only to, manage some of the things that they don't necessarily specialize in, but also rely on them when it comes to their knowledge of these types of regulations, right?
Right.
They just want to concentrate on their own product, on their own business, and the things that they're not very well versed in, they want somebody else to come in and help with that.
Right.
So with that in mind, I suppose, what are some of the trends or the insight that you might be able to offer? What do MSPs need to be aware of right now that might, elevate them as a company and offer something in addition to maybe something that they're not offering today?
Yeah. The funny thing is, I believe, Magic, that most of them are offering a comprehensive suite of services that address at some level these requirements that are coming down the pipe. The problem, I think, is that they don't know how they're addressing, and that's the gap. And you're right. The client needs to do their business. It's one thing to say, we want you to manage our IT infrastructure. We want to have help desk. We want to have all these services in place. This is taking it to another level because, not only is the MSP relied upon for that, now they're going to be relied upon for helping them, determine their own, suitability to these mandates. What of your services map to this particular requirement? Do I need MFA? Do I need asset tracking? Do I need encryption? And how does the stack of services that you provide map to those? Because I need that to answer these questionnaires. I need it if I'm going to be audited. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it's kind of another thing. And as I mentioned before, I don't take this lightly. I know this is a fair amount of work for the MSP, and it's additional work. But again, it's an opportunity. And there is some good news. There's some silver lining on this because I've gone through this exercise myself. There is a whole bunch more similar with these various mandates than there is dissimilar. And so good security is good security. And most of them ask for, with slight variations, the same sort of things. And once somebody understands the controls in the language of the compliancy mandates, and they have a pretty good sense of where they stack up on FTC safeguards, for instance, they're going to be in a much better position to adapt and help clients with CMMC and HIPAA and so forth. So there's some rather good news. And I think, that I think it presents an opportunity. In fact, I've heard from several that say, this could be the next big demand driver for our community is compliance and how to get compliance. So I think it represents, a good opportunity to get ahead of it for those who are going to spend the work early. The other thing is, we'd certainly not like to see them lose business, because if they come to their MSP partner and say, look, I need help with getting FTC compliant, and they don't have the answers, I think possibility of them finding either another MSP luring them away or them looking for somebody that can help them is pretty high.
Obviously, security and compliance are such huge topics in today's business world, right? Because yes, you are going to be audited. I mean, there's no doubt about that, right? In some point in time, you will be audited.
Right.
You need to have your house in order. Security, it's so important because one piece of bad press, something breached, it might destroy a company.
Yep.
Right? In today's terms, I mean, that is huge, and security is absolutely everywhere. It doesn't matter what type of business you run. IT is everywhere. Digital is everywhere. That's why security is so important. I'm thinking about your answer that you were given just there. You said there's opportunities, there's that silver lining. Do you see MSPs potentially, some of them, right, evolving into something else, into being more of on the compliance side rather than just providing the services?
Yeah.
Right? Because that's an interesting topic. MSPs are growing as a whole, as a community. It's probably one of the fastest growing type of a partner in the channel today.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So with all of that in mind, I mean, what opportunities are there for MSPs, and are they going to morph into something completely different than what they do today?
Yeah. That's a fantastic question. And this was sort of another epiphany I had 8 months ago. I was at a show and I had a couple of our partners, MSP partners, amongst others. This was sort of an eye-opening experience for me, but come to me and say, look, we are actually going to be providing compliance services. Either have spun off a separate organization, or are providing it within the framework of their current company. One of them is actually an authorizing agency or is in pursuit of being an authorizing agency for CMMC. So there's all kinds of different levels, but it is absolutely a direction. And I think, again, a way to differentiate your practice or build a new business, because it absolutely needs it in the marketplace. I just think there's, we MSPs as a rule understand the technology. Certainly they understand security. It's taken a next level and being able to understand how that maps to what is required of these clients. But yeah, there's, and that at a minimum needs to be, in my opinion, done. Right? MSP needs to understand how they map to those mandates. And if there's a hole or a gap, to add the products that will fill that gap, either as a standard service or maybe just put in the bullpen for when these requirements come to be. But, we, like I said, I 8 months ago, I knew very little of this. We had this epiphany. I didn't know much, but I've taken upon myself. I still don't consider myself an expert. I'll name names if given the opportunity, of people in our space who know a whole bunch more than I, and can be of assistance, I think, to many of your listeners. But I didn't know much, and I took it upon myself because they told me that our product checked a lot of the boxes that were required. So I may have mentioned this in our back and forth emails. We built over the last few months, a compliancy guide, an MSP compliancy guide.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I've learned, but we've had contributions from John DePero, a visibility MSP, from Paul, who's an expert in FTC compliance. He's taught me so much. HIPAA, Paul Redding with the compliancy group. I've known him for years. He used to be a partner, an MSP partner of ours. He is without question the most knowledgeable person about the HIPAA security and privacy rules, what needs to happen. Aaron Wyant with Dispatch Tech down in San Diego, I mentioned, is pursuing the authorizing agency for CMMC. Those guys contributed to this compliancy guide, and I'd be happy to provide that to you or to your listeners.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. We have the ability to put on some of those links and the names in the show notes so people can read up on this a little bit further.
Perfect.
As you were talking, I started laughing to myself because I recall when we opened up the conversation, I called it HIPAA, but it seems like the standard is to pronounce it HIPAA, right? Yeah. So apologies to everybody who's listening and they knew about this and they were laughing. Anyhow, a bit of humor.
Well, yeah, a lot of times we go, spell it HIPPA, and it's actually HIPAA.
So you talked about the experts that helped you develop that framework, let's call it, right? And when you got to know a little bit about it and were pursuing to grab that knowledge, I wanted to ask you, what are the watering holes apart from the people that you spoke to? I mean, the best thing to learn is to surround yourself with the subject matter experts, right? And that's how you learn. But if you don't have access to this and you really want to go and learn about this stuff, either as an MSP or a company that is thinking about bringing an MSP on to help them, what type of questions do they need to ask? Like, they need to educate themselves a little bit first. And the second part of the question is, so the first one is, where do you get that knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. And the second part is, how often do these regulations change? How often do they get updated? And how can MSPs stay on top of that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I probably, and with FTC, for instance, you've got to assign a resource or partial resource to be, sort of full time on this and to be up on the changes and implementation and care and feeding of this. There are services available also. In fact, the folks that I just mentioned are providing those services, and a lot of times that might be the right answer for a smaller MSP that doesn't have internal resources, a quicker way to get to that point. As far as understanding it, that's a tough one. Peer groups certainly leverage those folks, because peer groups are incredibly important and have a lot of resources, if not at the head of the group, then certainly with their members. Some people are going to be more versant on these topics than others. The other maybe recommendation is, if you were to, the government documentation has really improved quite a bit. It used to be cut and dry and almost unreadable.
Yeah.
And like HIPAA, for instance, used to be really loose guidance, relied upon the reader to ultimately implement a security plan and defend it and document it and be sure that it was in place. But a lot of times it was for you to explain why. The documentation has become much more readable and understandable and specific. And like with HIPAA, for instance, they recently developed, I think it's HICP publication. And that's commonly referred to as HICP. So you got HIPAA now.
Okay.
The next one's HICP. And that document is like, almost like a how-to manual. There's images and, little cartoons, things. And it's like, here's what you need to do. And by the way, as I mentioned before, give this to your MSP and be sure that they understand how to do this. And as well, if you're going to be using an outside service for this, make sure that they qualify and look for these items. So again, they're recognizing that MSPs are integral to this process, but they're suggesting who's qualified and who's not. And so if you're qualified, you'll get that business. If you're not, you may lose it. And so that's why I say it's important, I think, to sort of get ahead of it. Question number 2. Yeah, they change. I think they're getting more specific and saying, okay, rather than authentication control, we want multi-factor authentication. We're not going to leave it to your interpretation of what authentication control is. We want this thing specifically in place, which, by the way, is kind of one of the things that's really pissing off the FTC auditors, because people don't like it. People aren't implementing it. I don't see them changing a lot, even from, a few years ago. But as technology changes and the threats landscape changes, we're adding items to it. But ultimately, if you say, asset control or asset access control, those functions, while they may, change with the advent of new technologies or with new threats, they're pretty much that part of it is consistent. And again, the documentation online, those produced by the agencies, by the government, are really getting better. Not to make it sound like it's nothing. There is, you do need to stay on top of it, and somebody needs to do it. It's a burden. I hate to say it, but it is also, as mentioned, a terrific opportunity to get ahead of it and distinguish your offering, which is a challenge for our MSP community. How to differentiate the value that I provide. We don't want it to be based on pricing. Please don't do that. Do it on the basis of providing more value, more expertise, more thought leadership, more knowledge for your clients.
Right. So I suppose the risk of an MSP today not concentrating on these regulations, these compliances, it might actually put them at risk in terms with their own clients, right? Because those demands are going to rise and rise. The clients are going to get smarter about this as well, and we'll be looking for MSPs that offer that service, that that additional value apart from the regular services that they would typically provide, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, MSPs are all out there and talking to clients, and maybe your clients too. And you certainly don't want to have somebody approach your client and say, how does your client do with your, regulated by FTC? Is your MSP able to help you with that? Are they able to assist with your cybersecurity insurance questionnaire? Are they? Oh, they're not. It opens the door for them to take your client away. So at worst case, I mean that's kind of a worst case scenario. At best case, it's a bit embarrassing not to have questions if they come to you and you've got a tremendous relationship with them. The best case scenario is you're a little embarrassed, have to catch up, get those answers. Worst case scenario is, maybe before you even know it, they're somewhere else because they need this service and you're not in a position to help them.
In terms of resources, additional resources or tools, I suppose, for MSPs or maybe even just people who are interested in this topic, is there anything that you would recommend, so they can understand how to implement, compliance regulations effectively?
Yeah, I mentioned those guys. They're very helpful. Know a whole bunch more about the very details compliance. I can share with you what I did, Magic, and for us, it's been very useful. And in fact, the big difference between these things, as I mentioned, there's more similar than there is dissimilar, right? There are two big differences if you go from one compliance mandate to the other. One is nomenclature. Some might call it data sanitization. Mm-hmm. Some may say, expunge or kill outdated or no longer useful data. So the nomenclature changes. The organization changes, different ways of promoting it, different orders. And if you go to try and satisfy or map your services against one, and do it serially, it's going to be a tremendous amount of work because they're different terms, different all. What we did, I'm not saying this is perfect. We settled on an organization structure. For us, the most sort of common guidance is the NIST cybersecurity framework, CSF, a lot of people call it. It's organized in, 7 different categories. Gosh, I'd like to remember where they identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. That's sort of the organizational structure. What we did for our product, we mapped our controls in that fashion against the NIST cybersecurity framework. We did that before we did anything else. Then we mapped those I'm describing it verbally here, it's a little bit difficult. But if you think of a spreadsheet, we then mapped those controls into the controls of the specific mandates. We had a column for CMMC 1 and 2. We had a column, and it's easier to do that way. You've got the framework; it's consistent. Now you're mapping it to the specific controls required of the various mandates. I think that's, for us, it worked well. I would offer to anybody out there that might be a good starting point for them. If an MSP wants to sort of begin assessing and mapping and documenting their controls, I could provide the raw spreadsheet files. And if they wanted to, and then if they use Beachhead, fantastic, they got a head start. If they don't, though, they can at least use our information to see how we mapped it to that particular thing, and then take the rest of their stack and services and do the same thing.
Right.
It worked for us. We used it to build a matrix within that compliancy guide that I mentioned. And I think it made good sense for us. I think it would also apply to MSPs who are interested in moving in that direction. So, that might be helpful. Be happy to help in any way I can. Those other guys, extremely knowledgeable, and I know them personally now, especially over the last 6 months. They're good guys. They'd be happy to help, even if it weren't in the pursuit of dollars in business.
Right.
They're just good guys. They're really forthright and helpful. They taught me a ton.
Perfect. So instead of you giving those documents to me, I believe the best thing to do would be for people to reach out to you, maybe on LinkedIn. We'll have the link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes.
Okay.
So are people okay to reach out to you directly?
Yeah, I have a presence obviously on LinkedIn. LinkedIn reminds me of work, so I'd be even better. And so as a result, I don't check it all that frequently. I'm happy to have my email shared as well.
Okay, perfect. So we'll include that in the show notes.
Okay.
Thank you for that. And then obviously we did talk a little bit about how you, for a lack of a better word, fell into the channel.
Yeah.
Right? What's the one thing you wish you knew before you started your channel career?
Well, I would have gotten into it sooner, I think. Honest to God, this is a great place to be. I don't know why. The people in it are very, very cool. and by cool, what do I mean? But helpful. Like guys, like I mentioned, like I've never seen a place where competitors help each other out and chat and are friendly. We have all these shows, Magic, that we go to, and everybody's got a smile on their face. Everybody's seemingly enjoying their careers. For us, we don't have the ability to, approach huge numbers of people. And so we leverage MSPs who are smart, ambitious business people who have developed relationships with their end clients. I can easily reach out to those folks, or more easily, and let them, do what's right for their client base. Again, they have those relationships. I hope they'll keep those relationships as we go through this process of compliancy.
Thank you so much for educating me and hopefully some of our listeners on all of these, very, very complex compliance regulations. Obviously, MSPs are going to evolve further,
right?
And time will only tell where they're going to end up. What kind of business will they be running? Because, like I said, I think they're possibly one of the fastest growing type of partner in the industry.
Yeah.
So it'll be really fantastic to see what is it that they're going to develop into in the near and the far future as well.
It will be interesting, and those who get on board sooner, I think, are going to be in a better position to grow their business.
Cam, thank you so much for joining me on Channel Voices today. We'll obviously keep in touch.
Yeah.
As we're both in the channel, those relationships typically last.
Yep.
So hope to be speaking with you in the future as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Magic. It's been my pleasure, and I look forward to continued conversations.
And that's a wrap for this episode. I do hope you found it valuable, and if you did, please make sure to subscribe and leave a review. You can also follow Channel Voices Podcast on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. Or just visit channelvoices.com, where you can send me a message or leave a voicemail. All of the links are listed in the show notes. And once again, I appreciate you tuning in today. Until next time.